And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall focus on economic and financial inclusion.
Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, is making significant strides in economic growth, but many Nigerians still face poverty and lack access to financial services. Now, according to the World Bank, about 30 million Nigerians don't have access to formal financial services, while 60 million remain financially excluded.
President Bola Tinubu's administration has made economic and financial inclusion top priority in its development plans. Some key initiatives include the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, the Renewed Hope Agenda, agent banking, mobile money, microfinance and financial literacy programs.
Now, there's been progress, no doubt, but challenges like financial exclusion, poor infrastructure, and gaps in regulatory framework still persist.
And it's encouraging to see the government's commitments. But for real progress, we need more collaboration among stakeholders, better infrastructure and innovative solutions.
If these challenges are addressed and opportunities are seized, Nigeria can make significant strides in financial inclusion, reduce poverty, and foster sustainable economic growth.
Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria today. We're going to examine the critical issue of economic and financial inclusion in Nigeria. Just recently, the Vice President Kashim Shettima had an important engagement, marking a major step in the government's push for financial inclusion.
And under President Tinubu's leadership, Nigeria is working towards a $1 trillion economy by 2030. With a strong focus on fighting poverty and driving sustainable growth.
The government has also introduced a new model and framework for economic and financial inclusion, aimed at improving access to capital and reducing poverty through legislative support and key policies.
Vice President Shettima underscored the importance of inclusive growth, reaffirming the administration's commitment to financial inclusion. He also highlighted Fitch Ratings' recent upgrade of Nigeria's credit outlook to positive, a sign of growing confidence in the country's economic direction.
And so today we will be talking about the government's initiatives, the challenges and opportunities in promoting financial inclusion, and what this means for everyday Nigerians, of course.
We'd love for you to join us as we unpack this important issue and its impact on Nigeria's economic future. So let's have that conversation. I am Victor Azu.
And I'm Ray John. Great to have you with us again this morning. Good Morning Nigeria is reaching you live on the network service of the NTA, and we're right here at our headquarters in Abuja. This is Africa's largest TV network. In the course of the program, Chukwudi Okolu will join us for newspaper review.
Thanks for being there. And up next is newspaper review.
All right, as always, we have with us Chukwudi Okolu. Good morning, sir.
Thanks for giving, real prominence to the pronunciation of that surname. Hello, Victor.
Good to see you.
Somebody told me it's a threat to loudspeakers. I said, now my name, leave it like that. Okolu.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
All right, so let's get into what the papers are offering this morning. We'll begin with the People's Daily. Just looking at the headlines on the front pages this morning. The People's Daily leads with FG wants fair visa policies to boost Nigeria's global trade presence. And away from that, we have 2 nabbed for raping 12-year-old in Yobe. Above the lead story on the People's Daily this morning, Kano Governor bans student labor in schools. And great collapse, Senate's partners South Korean firm for mini-grid solution. All right, page 15 has that if you want to see what that is about. And below the front page of the People's Daily this morning, we have AU endorses Nigeria's AFCFTA digital trade champion. On page 7, you can read up Anambra government to arrest women seen without bra pants in public. All right. No justification for soaring sugar price. Kano market leaders challenge Dangote and Boa. No justification for soaring sugar price. Kano market leaders challenge Dangote and Boa. And finally, from the People's Daily, we have revealed how Lagos Assembly invited DSS, other security agencies to hold reinstatement of impeached speaker. All right. Away from that, let's see what the blueprint has this morning. The blueprint leads with, as an aftermath of appeal court judgment, violence erupts in Osun, ex-council chair, 4 others killed. The riders, PDP, APC lay claim to local governments. Reps caucus 6 Tinubu's intervention. APC alleges SSG-led attack. Adeleke, PDP fault claim. We'll deal with corporates coming from police. Different sides to the story. Page 6 has all the details. Above that, of course, the Lagos Assembly crisis is on all the papers this morning, so we'll look away from that and see what's above the masthead. The masthead has Saudi Arabia donates 100 tons of dates as humanitarian assistance. That's on page 6. All right, below the picture story on the front page of the blueprint this morning, will employ technology to realize 2025 revenue target. That's according to the federal government. And below that, Nelfund opens portal for 2024-2025 student loan applications. Suspected headers invade Benue communities, kill 19. And finally this morning, Nigeria's inflation to ease amid CPI rebasing, macroeconomic adjustments. Victor.
All right, thank you, Yembe. And I have the Daily Trust, which leads with this story. Saudi firm threatens to sue Hajj Commission over contract breach. For more on that story, check out page 4. And above that story, Amotekun sends back 114 northerners from Ondo, page 6. Despite court ban, VIO returns to Abuja roads, page 22. And Lagos Assembly adjourns indefinitely as move to remove speaker heightens, page 10. And then the Lagos story, of course, has the picture story as well. And at the bottom of the front page of the Daily Trust, Osun LG crisis, ex-council chair, others killed. Adeleke shots secretariats. We were official perpetrators. That's according to the IGP, page 3. And on the left strip, we have 3 more stories and we go. Manufacturing sector on its last breath. That's according to MAN, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, page 19. Gunmen kill 19 in Benue, page 7. And finally, firm releases Africa's first feature film on AI, page 30. Chukwode.
The manufacturing sector is on life support.
On its last breath.
Last breath. So it should be on life support. Okay. Amotekun sends back 114 northerners from Ondo. You want to find out the process of
I haven't read the details.
Yeah, you want to find out the process of doing that because there are certain things that only a court can make happen. I don't know whether people have the right to send people back just like that. We know that there is growing concern over, activities in some communities across Nigeria, blamed on some people and all that. But still, you have to be careful how you take care of what you see as a problem so you don't end up creating 2 or 3 more. It's very important. So let them pay heed to that. Now, this violent eruption in Osun, imagine, ex-council chair, 4 others killed. I wanted to say that we had started jubilating over reduced bloodletting during or after polls and all that. Yeah, if you go back, you'll notice that it's beginning to ebb. It's no longer as bad as it was. So for this to happen, it takes us back to square one. Square one is uninhabitable for us as a people if we believe in democracy and its dividends and the freedom to to partake in it.
You remember the days of the Wild Wild West?
Yeah, the Wild Wild West in those days. We hope that this does not introduce Wild Wild West again, because this is still happening from the West. But remember that the other cases have been recorded not just in the Wild Wild West. Still, I say that generally there seemed to have been a kind of let-up.
So this is probably a resurgence of something unwanted.
Yes, let them handle it. Then the Lagos Assembly adjourning indefinitely, has moved to remove Speaker Heightens. I don't know. Is it that Lagos Assembly, are they now growing so mature that mentorship, which was coming from some elderly politicians in that state, is being, jettisoned or what? Yeah, I still think that we need a situation where there should be somebody who can be listened to by vexed politicians. Yes, you have the right to make up your mind as a young man or young woman, but part of the problem in Nigeria now is that the young people are not listening to elderly people in this country, and they tell you the internet is responsible for it.
Unfortunately, sometimes
you ask, is the internet not in Japan and China?
We live in a world where sometimes the elderly, if you perceive that the elderly is going to mislead you, then you don't want to listen. But
I don't know.
In politics, what is permanent is interest.
Victor, I don't like picking these little fights with you. Whatever we think Nigerian elders have done, the young people still need to take some lessons from elderly people.
I mean, I listen to you, don't I?
All right. Well, talking about young people,
yes.
Maybe we should, make known those who should benefit from the NEL fund across the country. That's big news away from what's happening in Lagos. NEL fund opens portal for 2024-2025 student loan applications. So it's good that we hear that in the first 2023-2024 section, some schools in some parts of the country were not, a part of it. We hope that this time around they would take advantage of this program and, get all that, is available on the platform of NEL Fund.
That's it.
You talked about bloodletting earlier. I was hoping that you would also add what's happening in Benue, because this is serious. Farmers returning home from their farms, 16 were killed Sunday, and then some more were killed on Monday. I mean, this just needs to stop.
What was it? I think it was Delegewa Oreekbu who talked about assured mutual destruction. When they were talking about those were the days of Newswatch in its bloom and all that. When people live together and the things that happen among them begin to suggest that there is, mutual annihilation, it doesn't help people at all. It doesn't. What I need to say concerning Benue is that the federal government is not showing enough control over the situation in Benue. Whatever level of animosity exists in Benue, among the peoples there, the federal government has a job to tell people, we can't let you go on like this. Otherwise, there's failure somewhere.
All right, and I do hope that the authorities are listening to you. So thank you very much for today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
After calling me an elder.
Good morning, Nigeria returns after this break.
All right, just watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. And to begin our conversation this morning, which borders on economic and financial inclusion, let's take a look at this background report put together by our correspondent, Ibrahim Dan Hamidu.
In a world where access to financial services is a fundamental right, millions of Nigerians remain excluded. Economic and financial inclusion is a pressing issue, with far-reaching consequences for individuals, communities, and the nation as a whole. Nigeria's informal sector accounts for over 70% of the workforce, Yet, many of these individuals lack access to basic financial services like savings, credit, and insurance. This exclusion perpetuates poverty, limits economic growth, and undermines social stability. However, technological advancements and innovative financial products are bridging the gap. Mobile banking, agency banking, and fintech solutions are expanding access to financial services, especially in rural areas. Economic and financial inclusion is not just about access to services. It is also about empowering marginalized groups like women and youth. By providing them with financial tools and resources, government can unlock their potential, foster entrepreneurship, and drive economic growth. To accelerate progress, policymakers and regulators must create an enabling environment. This includes implementing policies that promote financial inclusion, strengthening regulatory frameworks, and supporting innovative financial products. Experts and government think tanks agree that the impact of economic and financial inclusion is transformative. It improves livelihoods, increases resilience, and enhances overall well-being. As Nigeria strives to achieve sustainable economic growth and reduce poverty, financial inclusion must remain a top priority. Join us as economic and financial experts discuss bridging the gap between economic and financial exclusion, recognizing progress, acknowledging challenges, and reaffirming our commitment to creating a more inclusive financial system for all Nigerians.
All right, many thanks, Ibrahim Hamidu, for that background report. And to begin our conversation on economic and financial inclusion, let me introduce here in the studio Dr. Nuruddin Abubakar Zauro, Technical Advisor to the President on Economic and Financial Inclusion. He is also the Secretary and Head of the Pre-SEFI Secretariat. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much. Good morning. It's a pleasure.
All right, we have also been joined here in the studio by Dr. Stephen Ambore, Technical Lead, Economic and Financial Inclusion. He's also a member of the Technical Committee, Pre-SEFI. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
All right, also joining us for the conversation, but this time around, all the way from our Lagos studio, it's a pleasure to introduce Professor Yinka David West, Dean, Lagos Business School. He also doubles as the technical and research advisor to Pre-SEFI. Many thanks for joining us, and good morning, Nigeria. Prof.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and member of the technical committee, Pre-SEFI, Madam Mojukbe Ladikwo. Thank you for joining us too for the conversation.
And thank you for having me.
Now, what does it mean when we talk economic and financial inclusion? You know, so that some of us on this side will know whether we are included or excluded, and they begin to chase it.
Okay, it's all right. Thank you so much, my brother. Good morning, Nigerians, and good morning, our dear viewers from wherever you are looking at us from. So, economic and financial inclusion, you know, as it were, you know, for person to have access to formal financial services, of course, and also economic opportunities, you know, for all Nigerians. So, you know, financial inclusion, you know, has to do with maybe getting onboarded, you know, from the informal sector into the formal. For example, now you have you have been onboarded to have your BVN, and then you open an account, of course, to have access basic financial services like savings, credit, insurance, pensions, and other forms of streams of financial services. So this is the conventional, financial inclusion perspective, while the economic inclusion, has to do with the, those economic opportunities, gainfully employed, doing one or two things, and if there's any, economic opportunities either from the government or private sector, you should, and of course you deserve a right to also get onboarded. So what we're trying to say is that the two, need to work together, because while you have access to financial services, there's also a need for an enabler, which is the economic inclusion, so that it can sustain you within the access space. If you open an account, you are formally, within the formal regulated entities like financial services providers, there's also a need for you, to have some activities that will back it up, right? For you to remain, active in the usage. So if you look at it, there are, factors attached to it. For example, the kind of financial services that is being provided for you, that gives that is about, equality of service in addition to the access itself, which we spoke about. So basically, we're talking about economic opportunities and financial inclusion. When you are in there, then you are deemed to be financially included. Good morning.
I want you to throw more light on the economic inclusion. What are the programs really that the government is looking at to make people economically inclusive?
Well, anyway, in terms of the way I refer to it as economic opportunities, we have a full-blown ministry that is humanitarian, and which champion initiatives such as social investment programs of government, all these conditional cash transfer, all these other initiatives that government in, even the food security and anything that will bring every economically active Nigerians to have access to basic economic opportunities and remain, within the economic space, for him to be economically, gainfully employed or something. So all those ones are part and parcels of economic inclusion. It's actually broader, because anything that make you to be active and of course have basic access, I think you are deemed to be economically, what they call it.
You see, I actually asked you that question because, I didn't want to take it out of your mouth about the conditional cash transfer, if that was one of the ways to make people economically inclusive. In your view, Dr. Nuruddin Abubakar, I'm sure you know so much about economics and financial literacy, everything that can get anyone empowered financially and economically. Would you say conditional cash transfer, as is being done in the country, is a way to really empower people?
Well, anyway, the first issue here is that we're looking at those, what do you call it, economically disadvantaged group, for them to be encouraged to come into the formal financial space, isn't it? Because, based on the report that has been, released by FINA, we still have somewhere around, 30 million Nigerians who does not have basic access to financial services. So in order to encourage them to come into the formal financial space, from what we call informal sector into the formal sector, then those economic opportunities like what they call a conditional cash transfer and other schemes like that, they are all motivators or enablers for people to actually come into the formal financial space, right? So from the government side, series of activities actually are being churned out in order to encourage those class of people, because they are actually the target. Do you understand? There are, when you're talking about those, there are some vulnerability or some gaps, or some groups, that are more vulnerable to lack of access. We're talking about those living in the rural areas. We're talking about also gender imbalance. More women have lesser access. More women have, women have less access, compared to men. Then also the youth, that is the age 18 to 35, they also have, they are among the disadvantaged, in terms of access to financial services. Then we have a particular segment of the country, for example, Northwest and Northeast, they constituted larger portion of the exclusion, then large chunk of MSMEs. So what we're trying to say here is that some of those policies and programs of government are also being churned out in order to target those specific groups, right, that are vulnerable to exclusion. So how can we now do such things to encourage them into coming into the formal financial services. Coming into the formal financial services has a lot of advantage, of course, for the government and, of course, for the people themselves as Nigerians in terms of policy, in terms of planning, and whatever the government included, there's a need to be backed up by the data. If government is taking certain decisions, they need to have certain backup, to ensure that this group of people that are not within the service, or they are vulnerable, or they are at disadvantaged position, how can we capture them into these financial services? I think that's it. And the implication of this on the national security, it is the idle mind, of course, that is vulnerable to go into all those misbehaviors like insecurity and all that issue. So economic approach to all these issues can contribute a lot into having Nigerians come in from financial services, of course, through economic opportunities and financial inclusion in the country.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Zauro. I've been wondering, really, how specifically, Dr. Ambore, is government now trying to address the issue of financial inclusion? By the way, what does it mean to be financially excluded? Because some by choice, he's mentioned banking services, financial services and all of that. Some do it by choice. They rather want to keep their money and maybe, free themselves from these pinches here and there, like some of us go through. So what does it mean to be financially excluded in the real sense of it? And what is government doing to address it? Because some of them, are in the courts of government.
Thank you very much once again. Just like Dr. Zoro said, financial inclusion is about a couple of things. One is the access to finance. One is the usage. So if you have access and there's no usage, you're not necessarily financially included. And the quality of the kind of product you get, and of course the range of products. So most of the times when you hear financial inclusion, most people think it's all about bank accounts. But it's about savings, it's about credits, it's about insurance, it's about pension. So what this says is, in addition to the fact that you need access, there's an issue about resilience. You can imagine what happened during COVID-19. What if something happens and you are wiped off? What is the insurance part of it for you? I mean, how do you survive that, the resilience aspect, So it's a whole lot of things together. And again, what does exclusion mean? What does being financially excluded means, like you asked? So basically, I'll speak about this from the viewpoint of barriers. What you're saying is people make decisions not to for certain barriers. Some of the barriers costs, some specific experience, some about trust and all that. And that's what the entire conversation about being financially included is about. There are some group of people that is not by choice that they were excluded. So this is about bringing policies and programs that will facilitate their inclusion. And there are some group of people that decided that for one experience or the other, they don't want to be associated with certain things. So those barriers as well are being looked at and addressed. Government has been leading financial inclusion for a very long time, but there's a bit of a change. This current administration, instead of looking at financial inclusion separately from what is happening at the economic inclusion space, they thought it's wise to bring financial inclusion and economic inclusion together, because after financial inclusion, what next? You're talking about economic potential, like Dr. Zoro explained. In addition to having access to finance, you want to enable every Nigerian to be able to live to the fullness of their economic potential. So a woman that is in Niger State, and give her access to finance, and then what? But it's going to be much more useful and profitable to her if, for instance, because she has access to finance, she knows that she can sell her product beyond Niger State. She can now sell to Abuja because she has capability to receive payments, to send payments, and because of her business track record, she can now have access to credit because she has a track record of business. So it does a lot of things. So what this government is trying to do is bring these two things together, so that as we are addressing financial inclusion challenges, we're addressing economic empowerment challenges, we are looking at it from a sustainable perspective. And what Dr. Zoro is doing as the technical advisor to the president is basically, for the first time in the history of Nigeria, elevating this conversation to the table of the presidency, the table of the National Economic Council, so that these conversations do not happen in isolation. It's part of a bigger national plan. So this is what this is all about. Thank you.
All right. Many thanks, Dr. Ambari. You said that Dr. Zoro is, as a technical advisor of this presidential committee on economic and financial inclusion, is taking the conversation, to the presidential. How did you put it? To the president. I thought you were going to say taking it down to the average Nigerian, that needs to be financially and economically, included. But you see, let me get to Professor Yinka David West. What I just said, I said that, to ask why this committee is different. I mean, we've had different committees talking about, just trying to alleviate the sufferings of Nigerians, but yet the number of those who are getting into poverty in Nigeria keeps increasing. So tell us, what is unique, what is different about the Presidential Committee on Economic and Financial Inclusion? And tell us, some of the programs, that you have started or you intend to start that would really help you meet your objective.
Thank you. What's different about the committee? I think the financial inclusion space and the economic inclusion space have always been separated. And one thing we've seen is that the financial inclusion space has been led by the financial sector providers, especially the central bank and other regulators within the sector, as well as the operators. And the economic inclusion space has been led by different government agencies, depending on what aspect of economic inclusion we're talking about. And when we say economic inclusion, it's very broad, because it could be access to employment and jobs. It could also be access to entrepreneurial activity or access to retail or different things. So what this committee is doing is that, there are two sides of the same coin, but let's look at it holistically. Where are the handoffs and where are the complementarities, and how can we ensure that we're using one bullet really to fight multiple challenges and problems. So in bringing the two together, we're talking about how do we ensure that all Nigerians have economic access and are economically active. And then the second is, how do we ensure that when they're economically active, they have access to quality, affordable financial products and services that can enhance their economic activity and also promote better access to growth and scale within their businesses. So it's really multiple things under one umbrella. Now, why is this different? I think it's really the bringing together and acknowledging the fact that there are trade-offs and intersectionalities that we need to work on. Some of these intersectionalities are around women and gender, right? Women and gender. Some of them are around underserved, some of them are around youth, some of them are around geographic location. And each of these gaps or barrier areas that we've identified will need different solutions. So there needs to be in-depth understanding of what is the nature of the real problem and how do we get to solving each of these problems through different programs and initiatives. And I can tell you that there is no one-size-fits-all program to these things. It's really about understanding what are the nuances and how do we go step by step. But then again, the government is not doing everything. The government is also working with private sector, because private sector also has a role to play. Private sector employs Nigerians as well. Private sector provides activity. Private sector provides the market as well. So how do we ensure that we're all singing out of the same hymn book to ensure that all Nigerians can thrive within their spaces, they can have access to good and reasonable and decent livelihoods, and then they can move forward. So the programs that will be coming out of the Secretariat, which is the entity that will be formed to really now work with private sector, work with different civil society organizations, will now be framed on a needs basis. And one of the things we're going to be doing is working out a plan around what are the different key activities that we need to solve, but also being mindful of the fact that poverty is an increasing problem. So that is also going to be a way of prioritizing what are the low-hanging fruit that we need to deal with, and how can we get economic activity, livelihoods enhancements to Nigerians that are currently excluded. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor David West. Let me just, beside you here, engage Modupe Ladipo, who is Pioneer CEO of EFINA and a member of the technical committee. I'd just like to know if there are already infrastructure. Of course, a lot of people talk about the gaps in infrastructure, which could be a part of the exclusion that we talk about. For instance, if you go to the hard-to-reach areas where you don't have ATMs, which is supposed to be the closest, and you find that it becomes a bit more difficult for people to be interested. So are there infrastructure now being put in place to enhance the economic and financial inclusion that we speak of?
Thank you very much for that question. So there are a few things that have been done in the past as well to address this exact issue that you've described about distance to financial service providers. Agent banking was launched, I think more than 10 years ago, to address these issues where people could then transact at their various mom and pop shops local to them to do various transactions. But that also depends on having good mobile network operations in that area. So there are gaps of that sort that we need to address. We need to address first the mobile network, make sure that every single LGA has good coverage. We need to expand the footprint of agents to make sure that you can go to many different access points if you want to transact. We need to improve on our financial literacy as well, use infrastructure to get the financial literacy out. The NIN, we also need to ensure that we make the enrollment on NIN as easy and as simple as possible. And we also then need to make sure that when people are the less advantaged, of course, when they are going to get social grants or conditional cash transfers, we make the process as seamless and as easy for them and cost effective. Because if we don't do all those things, then some of the things that we're working on will not be so successful. So those are the key sort of infrastructure things that we're looking at in the short term, making sure that we expand access points, making sure that the ecosystem for using digital increases, making sure that people understand how they should use those things, improving on consumer protection, making sure people understand if I lose my phone, what happens, if my money goes missing, what happens. We need to protect the consumer more, educate them more in their language of choice, not just necessarily English, and then we'll feel that we have a more robust ecosystem that supports a good range of financial transactions, not just banking. I think once we get to that point, then we would really be able to get going. And micro pensions as well, they've done a lot of good work around that, introducing pensions to the informal workers, but we also still need to make sure that the process for if they want to cash out, because they're allowed 25%, that process, all those things, we need to make them as simple, as easy, and not complex at all, so that everybody then feels that they're able to participate irrespective of their level of education or the language that they speak. So those are the kind of initial infrastructure issues that we will be tackling as part of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Modupe Ladipo. We'll return to Lagos shortly, but let's get back here in Abuja, and I'd like Dr. Zoro to, respond to the next question. I asked Professor, David West about, this committee. She also said it herself. When you talk about financial inclusion, the financial service sector, they're trying to do that, get everyone included. When you talk about economic inclusivity, different ministries are, on their toes. The Agric Ministry, Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, trying to get, people, economically active and, if you like, included. So, I'd like you to really give me the specifics of this committee. Really, just explain why, this committee is very important. Let us know some of the programs that you have planned. Maybe you started some, that we do not know about. Let us know how this would really help you meet this objective of financial and economic inclusivity.
Okay, thank you so much, my dear. Thank you so much for that question. Okay, great. So, as the previous speakers, talked about previous approach to this financial inclusion, and of course, this administration, we came on board bringing the two together, to see that economic inclusion and financial inclusion match just for sustainability. So now, when we came on board, what they did was, this administration, first of all, the blueprint, which is the what they call the renewed hope agenda of this administration, built in this renewed hope agenda, it's very clear. Inclusivity is one of such, right? Access to capital, employability among the eight-point agenda, which is very clearly stated by Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So again, Dr. Stephen spoke about elevating the conversation around financial inclusion to the presidency, which I think you even asked a question about. Before now, the implementation of this financial inclusion has been an institutional approach. Financial sector has been leading, particularly the regulators. Do you understand? But there are lots of other initiatives going on, especially within the economic inclusion space. So when this administration came up and I said, okay, because of the importance of this, particularly it has a lot to do with elevating people from poverty, out of poverty, isn't it? So now the conversation around it was around economic and financial inclusion was then elevated to the National Economic Council. Why National Economic Council? This is, constitutional structure, which of course comprises both the national and subnationals, isn't it? And every Nigerian, including you, a member of one subnational or the other, you are from one local government or state or whatever. So within that thinking, do you understand? Then we now realize that there's a need to take it to the presidency, which is the apex, administration in terms of policy makings and all that. So that is why initially, that was in April, precisely on 25th of April 2024, a stakeholders workshop was held, in the villa. The intention was to bring the stakeholders together to discuss, to give us a clear understanding what do we need to do. This administration is the listening administration. We need to do it the people's way, not our own way, isn't it? So now we ask people, how do we do it better? And it's at that point that the ASWA Accord on Economic and Financial Inclusion was actually signed on that day. What does ASWA Accord means, to Nigerians? Basically it has about three things in that content. The first thing is the recognition of the importance of economic and financial inclusion by this administration. Number two is the commitment. To show that this administration is actually committed to supporting Nigerians to ensure that they are economically and financially included. Do you understand? It's one thing to do, it's another thing to be seen to be doing it. So this time around, we now symbolically showed Nigerians that we are really committed to this journey. Then finally is to promote a partnership among the key players in this space. What about the part? We've been talking about public-private partnership, right? So, but this time around, we even encourage the public public-public partnership within the public sector should also partner within themselves. If Central Bank is doing one thing, Ministry of Finance is also doing another thing within that space. Let them come together so that collectively they can actually do better, isn't it? Then again, among the private sector, private partnership is also being encouraged. Then collectively, let's do the public. So on that day, what they call it, a symbolic commitment was done, which as well was signed, meaning that it's just like a blueprint, for the country in order to support Mr. President's, initiative of getting Nigeria to $1 trillion economy by 2030. That can only be achieved if every economically active Nigerians has a right, to have access to economic opportunities and financial inclusion in Nigeria. So that is actually the approach that was done. So thereafter, you understand, a lot of series of activities took place, which might be also is a very long list of activities. Last year, we
just highlight
concentrated.
Some. We want to know.
I will do that, but just the last aspect, which is the committee, I want to land there. We can go back to the initiatives, but last year was actually a year of awareness, advocacy, publicity for people to know what the government is actually doing. Series of activities took place, which I want to jump. But lastly, we landed at the committee. This committee was actually set up on 4th of December 2024, and eventually just last week Monday, which was on 10th of February, the committee was actually inaugurated. So if you look at the composition of that committee, you will now understand that the conversation around economic and financial inclusion has taken a new dimension. Like I said previously, financial sector driven by central bank, but even now still remain the same, but we have broadened it to bring about economic opportunities, which is the enabler to support financial inclusion. So the composition of the committee. Now, we have the governance committee, which is just like a board, the high level decision making level at that level, headed by the vice president as the chair, the minister of finance as the deputy chair. Then we also have the deputy chief of staff to the president, which is the head of the administration in the office of the vice president. Then we also have honorable minister of innovative and digital economy, which provide all the necessary infrastructure that my brother spoke about, isn't it? All those support, connectivity, internet, and all that other is the duty of Ministry of Communication, Innovation, Digital Economy. Is also onboarded. The Minister of Humanitarian also, which handles all this social investment and other some of incentives, sort of government incentivization to support poor and vulnerable Nigeria, is also a member of that committee. Central Bank Governor is also a member of that committee. What does that mean? The entire financial sector, because of the very important roles, policies, programs, and innovations they are doing to support the last mile, is also onboarded. Example, of course, Stephen has spoken about agent banking. Without agent banking, somebody in Gamborungala wouldn't have had access to financial services by now, because if you have to wait for banks to set up a bank there, it's not something that is coming soon, because they have to make profit, right? But with this, agent banking and other very beautiful initiatives rolled by central bank and other players, now this thing is a reality. So he's also a member of that committee. National Security Advisor is also a member of that committee because of the national security imperative of what these economic solutions are also. He's also a member, right? We also have a private sector representative. There's a particular Professor Emmanuel Etapson, because of the role they are also playing in settlement of the infrastructure, which has been detailed by Mrs. Modupe Ladipo, is also a member of that committee. Then there is also a secretary, a member secretary, and of course the head of the secretariat, which by his grace I am actually the one sitting in that role. So what we're trying to say here is that is the board level. Then we also have the second level, which is a technical committee. Technical committee is the composition of people who are experts within their own space, and they are heads of ministries, departments, and agencies. For example, now it's been chaired by the Director General of NIDA, that is National Information Technology Development Agency, right? The question is, why NIDA? Because they play a very big role in the provision of the digital infrastructure, or they are regulators of information technology in Nigeria, isn't it? So they play a very important role, because we know that leveraging technology is the way to deliver those financial services. So he heads that. Then we have the deputy. It's been deputized by the Deputy Governor, Financial System Stability of Central Bank of Nigeria. I'm sure I don't need to explain the role of CBN within this space. It is quite massive. Then we also have members like Nigerian Governors Forum. Why Nigerian Governors Forum? They hold subnationals, right? All the governors of the country, they need to coordinate certain things in their local government and state government. So that's where Nigerian Governors Forum play a very important role. NCC is also, EVC of NCC is also a member. That is in terms of phone, telecoms, and all that. The role we play right in this space. So it's also a member of that committee. Very important member is also Director General of NIMSI. Identity. Identity is actually the foundation. When you talk about infrastructure, there's no way you can do any such, without having to be enrolled formally, and the entry point is actually what is NIMSI. So DG NIMSI is also a member of that committee. We have EVC of FCCPC. FCCPC, Stephen spoke about consumer protection, to restore trust in the system. So they do a lot in order to ensure that the trust vested on so he's also a member of that committee. I've landed. We have private sector players. Private sector, we have the Stephen who is seated here, and then Modupe Ladipo, and we also have Lagos Business School who are providing the technical and research service.
So who's representing the average Nigerian in the hinterlands in this committee?
We have technical committee. These are decisions, but when you get, we even have ambassadors, which comprises of
you have a lot of people.
Yes,
big people.
Not big people,
and a lot of them. But the idea is this: how exactly, apart from being mentioned in the Renewed Hope agenda, I'm wondering, how do initiatives like the National Financial Inclusion Strategy and then the Renewed Hope agenda, how do they directly impact everyday Nigerians? And I'm talking about those particularly in the rural areas, Dr. Ambore.
Yes, thank you very much. In the end, let me start where she landed. Are ordinary Nigerians represented on this committee? Yes.
Don't tell me you are the one representing them.
They are leaders in traditional institutions that are actually ambassadors, just to make sure that we are not just expert focus or mandate owner focus. We're actually here from the grassroots. And anytime we're designing any program or policy, you can rest assured that feeds come from subnation as a part of it, so that we'll do the bottom-up approach. How does this affect an average Nigerian? I'll give you an example we've spoken about before now. As early as 2015, there were a lot of local governments in Nigeria that did not have single financial service access points. There's no bank, nothing. And I'm sure we are witness to that. Fast-tracked it today. While we are not saying access to finance is 100%, there is no local government in Nigeria that you go to that you not have at least an agent, a banking agent. That did not happen by accident. It happened by deliberate policy design. Shared agent network expansion facilities. And
when you say banking agent,
yes,
so that we, the people understand, what do you mean by banking agents?
Okay, we know banks and we know what banks do. Banking agent is simply, I will send you as my representative, as a bank, to go to that place and do certain permissible financial transactions on my behalf. Like for POS, you can go and do cash in, cash out. So anybody that is...
When I want it, or whenever you come?
Well, you are supposed to be domiciled there. But what is important is they've been empowered to go to where the banks are unable to go to and do certain things. At minimum, cash in, cash out, bills, payments, and all that. Again, I'm saying things have changed. If we're there, we'll not be having this conversation. We're basically trying to look at whatever we have and improve. So that's an example of how this thing affects an average Nigerian. And the adoption of digital services really to drive financial inclusion. When I was in university, I was schooling up north. My parents were in Lagos. By the time they sent me money to school, we were on vacation. 27 days. But, right now is no more the case. Just to show you that this is not just about talk, it's about deliberate policy that actually affects ordinary Nigerians. So what we do is to continue on that trajectory, look at the problem space, discuss with mandate owners, discuss with private sector players, come up with innovative solutions that at the end of the journey, more and more of how this policy translates to affecting everyday Nigerian, more of these testimonies will come out. Just to let you know, there's a huge linkage. It's not about just the committee. It's deliberate to bring about key changes.
It's not about the big names.
It's not about the big names. It's about all of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ambari. Let's get to Professor David West now. She's the technical research advisor, to this committee. Professor David West, I know Victor would not be happy about this, but I want to know how this affects women. We know they're the most vulnerable. When you talk about economic and financial inclusion, of course, many women are excluded. As a technical advisor, research advisor, just let us know how this committee is trying to bridge that gap, trying to bring equality, as far as the women are concerned, talking about this topic. Talking about this topic.
Thank you very much. I think one of the voices of the people also comes from research and evidence. So when we say we're technical and research advisors, it's really about bringing out the nuances and the voices of the different communities that we want to address. So regarding women, we're going to look at women, for example, we look at policy or research from 3 dimensions or 3 perspectives. First of all, we look at it from the demand side. What is happening to the actual person or the group of persons or a segment of the group of persons we're trying to work with? The second dimension we look at is the supply side. What's happening on the provider side of the market? And again, if it's women in financial services, what are the products that are available How well are they serving the women? Are they reaching the women? Are they meeting their needs? Is there a product market fit in the product that is being served or provided by the financial institutions? Do they need more physical or digital products, etc.? So on the supply side, we'll look at that as well. The third lens that we look at things through would be the policy side. And you realize that sometimes policy might be the glue that needs to shift a little bit to ensure that, we're moving things forward. And then on the policy side as well, what we're thinking around is, okay, to what extent do these policies actually serve women? Because what we've discovered is when we're designing for women, you're designing for everybody, but you're taking into consideration different nuances that don't really apply to other genders. So for example, a woman typically, especially a woman that does 70% of her work in the household, hardly moves from point A to point B. So she's further excluded from having access to financial services because her husband or her counterpart is going from the home to the office, and in that commute has access to different communities or different financial providers. So how do we think around, okay, what is the innovative way to be able to ensure that I can meet women at their own area of convenience at the time that's convenient for them, and then also with the tools that they find easy to use. So it's really a plethora of bringing all these lenses into the play and then thinking around how do we solve for this. So it's not trying to, we're just going to do things, but what we're looking at is we're going to be solving for problems. We're going to be saying, how might we solve for this kind of woman? How might we solve from this kind of woman in a community, maybe in the northern states or in a community in the creeks? Because the nuances will be different. So those are the things that we're going to be informed through research, and hopefully working with the technical committee and informing them with this evidence, they can now begin to propose solutions that will actually meet those needs and goals. Research will also help financial providers in how do we communicate our products and services. And communication is critical, because sometimes Ms. Ladipo said something, not everybody speaks in English. The lingua franca of Nigeria might be English, but I might prefer to think in Hausa or to have information served to me in Hausa. Why should there be something stopping me in getting that? So it's really about meeting the people at their point of need, giving them that confidence that they are being served how they choose to be served, not how we think they should be served, and then we'll begin to unlock and unravel access to services. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor David West. I'll just stay with you in Lagos and speak with Modupe Ladipo. I'm wondering how much of financial literacy is in your programming. And the reason I ask is, assuming that we agree that that is needed for people to understand first and then embrace the financial inclusion programs that we talk about. So how much of financial literacy goes into your planning?
That very important question. As you know, if you don't know of something, you will never be able to use it. So before you even decide, is it important to you, is it not important to you, financial literacy or financial education is the key, it's the foundation of everything else that we do. Quite when we look at people's capability, financial capability across Nigeria, you see differences across the regions. Some people are aware, don't want to use, some people are not aware, some people don't even know what it is. So and it's not one size fits all. So in everything that we do, it cannot be one size fits all. People in the north is different. People in the south is different. Are you running a business is different. Are you working in the public sector is different. Are you working in the private sector? It is different. So we have to really take that financial literacy at all levels. as part of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, when we launched in 2012 initially, we had advocated for financial literacy and financial education to be embedded in the curriculum, in the educational curriculum from primary school. Because when I was in primary school, nobody taught us about budgeting, or financial literacy just wasn't important. So at least if we can start from there, then at least they're not as disadvantaged as we are currently, right? But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And we need to think about the channels by which we send the financial literacy, the information that is contained in the financial literacy. I see a lot of women, men, people at ATMs asking security guard, let me give you my PIN, put my PIN for me, I don't know how to use the ATM. All those things, they don't understand the risks of what they're doing. They don't understand that if the guard takes 2,000 or more than what they've asked for, they wouldn't know. So there are many aspects of financial literacy that we have to train them on. Insurance is another key part that we continue to see very low levels of uptake of insurance across Nigeria. We generally feel that why should you pay for something that may or may not happen? And when it doesn't happen, then my money is not returned, i.e. your premiums. So these are lots of multi-layers that we have to unpack, lots of different products that we have to educate, and it is a fundamental part of what we do. And I think as we move through rural population, women, youth, MSMEs, etc., different financial literacy programs in different channels, in different languages will be communicated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Modukwe Ladipo. Dr. Nuruddin Abubakar Zaro, as she spoke about financial literacy and getting people, to use financial services, what came to my mind is how successful you think this committee would be in terms of getting people financially inclusive. I said that because a lot of people at the moment who use banks and all of that, some are on the verge of opting out of such services because of the kinds of charges and all kinds of bottlenecks. Sometimes you do a transfer. There's so many challenges these days. With different financial institutions, and yes, some people would want to opt out. Of course, if you recall the issue about the change of the naira note, like the reprinting of the naira note at one time, that made a lot of people discouraged. Yeah. So speak to us really how you want to encourage those who are currently using financial services to remain and get those who are out of it in it. And then speak about the vice president's engagement. I understand that the vice president was involved in the present engagement as regards boosting Nigeria's financial and economic inclusivity. Speak to us around this.
Okay, thank you so much. On your first question, how successful, how they can be able to foster that. You see, like I said previously, different institutions are coming up with different initiatives, right? And what this committee does here is that I've mentioned the membership drawn from different, space. So what happened here is that all those institutions, they will be very happy to, respond to the call when it is something at the apex level of the government, which is the presidency, right? So now you're leveraging on the convening power of the presidency. Then when I'll say, okay, let's come together and address issues. If, for example, central bank is having challenges, it is not that it is a compulsory thing that NCC or NIDA or FCCPC have to, quickly come together and see how they can address it. But now it is the role of the secretariat, in the presidency, now to be able to observe these challenges which we have been talking about, like naira issues, redesign and all that, listening to people. Of course, while we are also being technical, we are also being politically mindful of what is affecting Nigerians. So it makes it easier, for us to come and say, hey, central bank, or hey, NCC or any other institution that is doing whatever they are doing, come, let's sit together, let's understand what are the people's voice, what are the people talking about in terms of this policy that you are actually bringing together, so that decision can be taken and change becomes easier. Do you understand? So that is to tell you this administration is quite mindful of people's outcry and then is ready to address the people's challenges, out there. So that is the attempts for the question one. Then the second one that has to do with the vice president's engagement, in this regard, it is also follow up to the first question, because the vice president, of course, being at the apex level of government as well, handling some of those economic issues, the chairman of the National Economic Council. And like I said, National Economic Council, NEC, is actually, having all the subnationals also members. So it's not about taking a policy decision at the national level alone, but it has to trickle down to the subnationals, isn't it? So at that forum, if there are issues that require the attention of any governor, unlike having to wait for the governor to understand this, then at that level some certain decision or his attention can actually be drawn, so that whatever decision that is taken at the national can also trickle down to subnational. So the vice president is quite determined to see, in line with the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's renewed hope agenda, I think it is also his responsibility to ensure that we design such policies and programs to support the president's renewed hope agenda, and that's exactly what he's doing. If you look at other clients, take example of India, for example. I think they were among the countries that were being mentioned that they deploy what we call digital public infrastructure in order to enhance economic and financial inclusion. At the end of the day, there are so many millionaires or billionaires among the middle class, that were created, as a result of the government policy of inclusivity and access. Do you understand? So many micro, small, and medium enterprises now came up. They were doing crazy good things, within the country. That creates jobs. That spikes a lot of development for their country. I could remember within a short time that initiative was started in India, I think they added about $8 billion or so, to their GDP. So in Nigeria, we're trying to also leverage on some of this. I just mentioned India. There are quite a lot of other countries which this initiative is situated under the office of the vice president. And the same thing also happened in. So just elevating it to some high level to show concern of this administration, because as Dr. Stephen, when he was talking, he did mention that for the first time in Nigeria's history that a conversation around the financial inclusion was elevated to the National Economic Council. That tells you that the administration is really, really serious and is really mindful of the concerns of Nigerians, and not only be mindful, but is ready to address them. Do you understand? So that's why we now expanded the scope, where even though my friend here spoke about representing the last mile, but within the numbers, within the representations and all that I have mentioned, we have a broader, because everybody has his own scope. Do you understand? So the last mile, that is the poor and vulnerable Nigerians, is fully represented to ensure that decisions are taken at the apex level, and that is actually what the vice president is championing to ensure Nigerians get the value for it. Thank you.
Is this the Indian model that we're adopting? There's nothing wrong if it works. India has a large population, so do we. Yeah. Is it the Indian model, or are we developing a homegrown model for ourselves?
Nigeria is Nigeria. We have to do homegrown in what we're doing, but leveraging or learning from other success stories is not out of place. Do you understand? Okay. So as you know, that the committee was just set up last week, headed by or chaired by Vice President. So a lot of discussions are going on. In fact, the terms of reference and all of that has already been done. So we're going to go and hit the ground running, to ensure that we learn from the success stories, and then how can we customize it to be a Nigerian grown solution. Because Nigeria is also going to lead the Africa, and of course projecting to the world. Let me give you an example if you want. All these gender inclusion you spoke about for women access to financial services. We hosted an event called Gender Inclusion, which is an aspect of the ASWA Accord on Financial Inclusion, precisely on 30th January this year. We call it She's Included. I'm sure you've seen it all over the world, right? What is so special about that one? Other clients, other countries like World Bank and all that, they are doing like Wi-Fi code and other initiatives we are adopting. But because of Nigerians, they want to do it in our own Nigerian way. We design our own local brand. How can we now coordinate the entire activity supporting women to have access to economic opportunities and financial inclusion, so that we can start to lower? Similar model, we'll do it from Nigeria.
We have to go on this break. I'm happy, at least Yere feels relieved that now you've talked about the women. That gladdens her heart, and I'm happy for her too. But we'll pause and go on this break so that when we return, the conversation continues. All right, many thanks for staying with us. We have been discussing economic and financial inclusion. There we have amazing guests, two here in Abuja, two in Lagos. But I'm about to get to Dr. Ambore, and I'll ask if there are innovative solutions or emerging technologies, that offer the most promise that you are looking to actualize your targets, say, in the next 5 years?
Thank you very much. We've been having conversation both during this interview and offline about financial inclusion. This is one thing in Nigeria that we first of all need to celebrate, even as we acknowledge that there's a lot to do. Modupe seated over there, over a past couple of years ago, started measurement for financial inclusion. If there's anything in Nigeria that you see that has improved consistently over the years, it's the rate of people that are financially included. And like I mentioned earlier, it is deliberate. And what is the thing that has driven this improvement in financial inclusion? It's anchored on innovation. Like I said, and I'll continue to say, technology in itself does not have any intrinsic value. So we do not want to focus on, the conversations around technology, around innovation. If we want to be innovative, we want to be innovative in understanding the problem. And Dr. spoke about nuances. And these nuances around the economic and financially excluded segments, and what kind of solution is most suitable for them. What kind of solution, and again, she spoke about demand side and supply side. What kind of solution, what sweeteners do you want to give? Because in the end, even providing financial services is business. Mm-hmm. You want not just addressing the need of the demand side, you want supply side actors as well to continue to provide service. Not when government incentivizes or catalyze, and the day government slows down, everybody pulls out. And there is business over there. So our our focus on innovation is just basically to ensure that in a collaborative approach, we sit down, understand these problems, work with mandate agencies, work with public sector, so that when we come up with solutions, it's impactful, it can scale, it is sustainable. Technology is important, but once we are sure that we understand what the problem is and where we're going to, whatever technology we apply will bring about the results.
In other words, you are not sure of what the challenges are.
We're absolutely sure of what the challenges are, but we are not throwing solutions at the challenges. We want to be sure that we co-create. Victor, if I want to provide a solution for you, I want to sit with you and be sure that it's something you like. I will not assume because I've had a conversation with you, I know you smile a lot, then I'll give you this particular solution. So we are not lacking a solution. Doctor spoke about evidence-based and research. We want to be sure that whatever we do addresses priority segments and can scale and can bring about impact. So we are not experts to put expert knowledge only on the table. We're basically to provide a fair understanding of the problem and discuss with solution providers so that whatever innovation comes addresses the problem for majority of Nigerians and indeed for the economy, because this is two-sided. One, you improve the economic outcome of a typical Nigerian. Dr. Zoro spoke about $1 trillion economy. You can only grow this economy if you have more people that are economically active in it. So it's going to benefit the typical Nigerian. It's going to benefit the government. The country will grow in all ramifications. So that's our perspective towards it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambari. Professor Yinka David West, as we begin to round up this conversation, I'd like you, while we're on that break, Dr. Zaro said that you've already come up with some initiatives. I'd like you to share a few with us and tell us what the focus of this committee is, say, in the next, it's new, December, right? Or a week ago. Now, in the next 3 years, what you aim to achieve, as a committee, what would you want to see, happening in the country as regards financial and economic inclusivity?
And what Dr. Zaro alluded to was that since April, when the ASO Accord was signed, we actually hit the ground running in trying to design and define the modalities for that led to the formation of the committee. And what we looked at was not just what the committee should look like and the representation and the voices on the committee, but also what the secretariat should look like and be doing. An important component of the secretariat is coordinating and working across institutions and solving some of the institutional voids that we see in government institutions working together. Another important aspect is stakeholder management. And you know, it's one of these things where it takes a village to raise a child. We're not saying that one party is going to do it alone, but we're saying that everyone has a role to play and has a stake. So how do we bring all the stakeholders together and manage these things? A third component that is very important is around the data and the evidence. Now, what does success look like to the committee? Success is not about how many meetings the committee has or how many people are on the committee. It's really about how have we changed and impacted the lives of Nigerians. How open, how more accessible and available are economic opportunities? How accessible are financial services to Nigerians? How can they make their choices? How can a woman who is selling wara in the market have access to credit or access to formal markets? So those are the success signs that we want to see, because the bottom line is the more people we see that are economically active and economically engaged, the more Nigeria can thrive. So we're not looking at this, the committee is only a mechanism to enable us to sit together, work together, and galvanize the traction we need to go into the marketplace and start to solve real life problems for real life people. So success, in actual fact, is really about ensuring that all Nigerians have access and are economically and financially healthy. Thank you.
Very much. And so in solving real life problems for real life people, what role does digital identity play when we talk about particularly financial inclusion? Because if you don't know the people, how are you going to provide? Let me direct this question to Modupe.
Good question, and that's why the antithesis of BVN when we started BVN all those years back was because within the financial sector we're not able to uniquely identify customers. So with the NIN, with the rollout of NIN now, we are hoping that that can be rolled out to all areas and every Nigerian citizen will have a NIN. Perhaps we can think about as they give birth, like other countries in America, for example, you get your number. Yeah, exactly. So maybe we can use that way to sort of fast track it a little bit so that we don't have to wait for them to be 16 or 18 or 14. Everybody starts to get that BVN. We need to have that unique identity, and we need to make sure that unique identity can then be used across multiple things. Because I've been back in Nigeria for 15 years and I've had data capture like 50 times. You data capture for phone, for your passport, data capture here, data capture there. We shouldn't need to do that. It's that multiplicity of collecting the same information is what people often find frustrating. So if we can have one way, which is the NIN, and everybody knows what NIN stands for and how they can get their NIN, then that will enable us to uniquely identify all individuals. Then they can begin to get access to loans, access to pension, access to different social grants. All those things become a little bit easier for us. So that has to be one of the first few initiatives that we will be working on, will be on ensuring that that digital ID, everybody has access to it. And I think once that's done, then some of the other things will be easier to implement. But I really must go back to a question you asked Professor David West around what does it mean for the impact look like for the committee. One of the key things that people have said all the time that we do the data is that one of the reasons why they don't have a bank account is that they don't have regular job, or they don't have, they're unemployed. So if we can address those two key things by giving them economic activities or expanding the economic activities for them to operate in, then we can automatically start looking at some of the excluded being brought on board, as well as being economically active. And also, if we can really work with all our MSMEs to make them more stable, to give them access to affordable, low capital, patient capital, then they in turn can also create more jobs, and more Nigerians can then become more economically active. So there are many sort of like, we will define our key performance metrics in the next few months, but these are some of the things that we really need to look at. How do we diversify economy, improve jobs, improve financial access, financial literacy, and covering all of that, digital identity, as well as consumer protection. Thank you.
So many thanks, Modukwe Ladipo. Very good answer to that question. You know, talking about what the committee sees as its impact in the coming months, if you like, years. But you see, some of the things you said are really very. I'm wondering how you want to meet some of these objectives, you know, as a committee, because different administrations have tried. You know, I'm talking about different ministries trying to work together, but yet I've not been able to, you know, hit the target. But, you know, as we round up the conversation, Dr. Nuruddin Zara, I'd like you to, you know, reassure Nigerians about why this committee is important, you know, your targets, and if you like, I'm sure you have timelines or milestones in the coming months. You want to share that just so that, you know, Nigerians watching you can be as optimistic as you are about the committee.
Okay, thank you so much, dear. I appreciate your question. Okay, so at the inception of this financial inclusion journey, way back in 2012, you know, a target was set to achieve 80% inclusion by the year 2020. You know, after that, you know, a midterm review was conducted, and it was realized that there are some, you know, verticals that are considered as key gaps. So, but at the end of the day, the target was actually jacked up, you know, somewhere around 2020, with the target of achieving 95% inclusion by the year 2024, right? That is inclusion, then that means the exclusion would only be 5%, right? So at the end of the 2024, now the committee was just set up, like you rightly said, a revised strategy, both from financial inclusion alone as well as the economic and financial inclusion combined, is certainly going to be revised. The target is going to be set up. In fact, as I speak with you this week, we are we're expecting the release of the terms of reference, you know, for that committee, whereby, you know, when the committee begins to solve, the target is had to be set up, you know, it will be communicated to Nigerians, the timelines and everything, so that Nigerians will also be able to hold the committee accountable, not only the committee, but also the administration accountable. Do you understand? I'm sure you have seen a lot of initiatives that have been rolled out, you know, within that space by this administration. It is now the responsibility of that committee, I mean, as well as the secretariat, to coordinate those activities, to be able to communicate, because it's only one thing to do it, but also to communicate to Nigerians, and also to guide Nigerians how they can benefit from some of these programs, so that at the end of the day, the promises by this administration, particularly of our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is being tracked and is being delivered as being promised. So we are mindful of that. Work is ongoing as I speak with you. Just look forward any moment from now. The TOR is going to come out. Target will be set. You know, we are working with all the stakeholders involved, including the development partners. Do you understand? So a national target, a national whatever is going to be built on, and I'm sure within that you can now be able to.
Are you sure the sub-nationals are willing to work with you on this? Because I mean, you know, sitting with the president and, you know, talking about all of this, I'm just wondering how it's going to go down to the person, say, in my village, you know. So are you sure that the sub-nationals are tagging along with you in this direction?
Within the governance committee, I've mentioned governors who are representing.
It's not about signing the paper. It's not about the paper. It's not about the signatures.
It's about the realities of it that I'm talking about. Do you understand? We have the sub-nationals, you know, they are represented by their leaders. Of course, we have governors. We also have local governments, isn't it? Chairman, in addition to other agencies that we're talking about. So, see, look, that concern of subnationals, I think that is where the elevation of financial inclusion to the National Economic Council becomes important. Because National Economic Council, that is the apex level where you have both the federal and the states. And that is a subnational. So actually, that's actually the thinking. And it's also a reflection of the ASO Accord, whereby subnationals were fully represented to take certain decisions, not only them, also the private sector. Do you understand? So all these things are being put into consideration, right. But we are also open for suggestions, additions, and other. It's work of Secretariat to be able to combine all those ideas, initiatives, and for us to do better things for Nigeria. Thank you.
But in addition to all of this, Dr. Ambore, how can the government ensure that its financial inclusion efforts are not just top-down, policies, but that they reach, and reflect the needs of, the people at the grassroots level?
Thank you very much. So, like what Dr. Zoro was saying earlier, this is a whole of government approach, and this committee, first of all, they are not the ones to be doing. There are no new things that they'll be starting. They are basically going to be working with mandate agencies and bringing that synergy within agencies with the support of the private sector.
So they'll be the ones implementing?
Of course. When Modupe was talking about NIM, we had an engagement with the DG NIMC during the week. They have their plans, fantastic plans. They're already collaborating. Us is to bring together, to provide all the support at the center and also at the level of the subnationals to drive this. And Prof mentioned what we've done very well in this space is measurements. We know where we are. We can always measure and know where we are. And we know when we are growing and we know where the barriers are, and we'll continue to improve. We are not doing financial inclusion for the sake of financial inclusion. There are certain things that we see on ground that will know that, things are changing. I mentioned earlier. So this is purely going to be data-driven and evidence-based. We have a solid M&E framework just to see where we are deviating and where we can improve, So this is not just about policy and pronouncements. There's a robust plan to ensure that the committee is doing their bits and we are measuring to ensure that we are on the right track. And like Mr. Victor mentioned earlier as well, you're talking about being financially excluded. Based on the variables you've seen, you begin to see certain things that are changing as a result of this effort. So we're looking at it from those perspectives. Thank you.
All right, let's round up the conversation now. Let's hear from the women in Lagos. Your final thoughts as we begin to round up the conversation. Any form of reassurances to Nigerians? Because I think that what the average Nigerian wants to see now is all of this talk translates to, tangible things. Having the really poor and vulnerable truly lifted out of poverty. All right, not just with the hand-downs, the 15,000 here or 5,000 here. Sustainable policies that, would actually take them out of poverty for life. So, just give us your rounding thoughts as we close the program.
I'll start off then. I think we need the support of Nigerians to enable us fulfill these goals. They're overarching goals, they're high achieving goals, but we can't do it alone. And I believe that, I think someone said, how do you get it to the village? It's something that we are working assiduously on because that is the target. That is the target, but it's about we can't do it without your support. So this concept of co-creation, this concept of enabling, this concept of having access to these people so we can have conversations and really understand and build services and products and channels by design. I believe that Nigerians have the capability, but we also need to be mindful of the nuances of designing for that capability. We need to think around inclusive and financial education that suits everybody. So if we say, for example, children can have access to bank accounts through their parents as proxies, but then again, how do they start to interact with financial service providers? Can we start to think about engaging them and bringing them into the space so they don't have to wait till when they're 18 to actually start using financial services? I believe that through the committee and through ideas and co-creation and working with the sector.
Professor Yinka, David West, we're actually out of time, really, and we wanted Modupe Ladipo to also share her last thoughts, but it looks like we do not have time for that, but we do appreciate you for joining us. So just, hear your final thoughts here in 30 seconds, because, I mean, we need to run. Dr. Zaro, maybe you go first.
Okay, thank you so much, what do you call it, for this wonderful conversation that we've just had now. Well, as for me, I would like to say for Nigerians, let them be, to reassure Nigerians that actually this administration is actually approaching this economic and financial inclusion differently in order to ensure that the promise, of renewed hope agenda is actually achieved. So on behalf of our principal, of course, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and his Vice President, that is Vice President Kashim Shettima, want to be sure that we'll do everything possible. They are mindful of what's going on, and they're going to do everything possible to ensure that this is delivered to Nigerians, and of course it will be communicated just to ensure that every Nigerian is not left.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Zaro. Dr. Stephen Ambari, Dr. Zaro has spoken your mind, we know. So I think we'll leave the conversation at that point because of time. Many thanks, Professor Yinka David West, Dean Lagos Business School, and of course Modupe Ladipo, pioneer CEO of PIFINA and member of the technical committee of PRESEFI. Many thanks for joining us from Lagos. We do appreciate your insights on the program. Dr. Nuruddin Abubakar Zaro, technical advisor to the President on Economic and Financial Inclusion, Secretary and Head of the PRESEFI Secretariat. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Stephen Ambari, Technical Lead Economic and Financial Inclusion and member of the Technical Committee of PRESEFI. It was a pleasure to have you. We just hope that all of this will translate to the good things that Nigerians want to see at the end of the day. Many thanks for being our guest. So that's Good Morning Nigeria this Tuesday. I'm Yenwe John. Please leave it locked on the NTA.
And I am Victor Azu. We'll see you again tomorrow.